After more than 10 years of intensifying electricity supply problems, government has finally decided to step in. Last night, President Cyril Ramaphosa announced measures to try and end the problem once and for all. The plan includes buying power from private producers and, of course, scrapping of licensing requirements for private energy projects. Well, Aviwe Mtila has been getting the reaction to the president's plans, while Nqobile Madlala has been out on the streets speaking to people impacted by power cuts on a daily basis. Both of them join me now and have those insights. Very good evening to both of you, and thanks for joining us this evening. Aviwe, we're going to start with you in that the unions have already started to weigh in on the plan that was announced by the president yesterday. What exactly is it that they're saying?
Well, while the president said that he consulted extensively on the set action that he's planned, the Secretary General of SAFTU suggests that this did not happen. He says, in fact, that they weren't consulted as what he called the coalition of the excluded. That would include your AMCU and all these other structures that aren't necessarily part of the tripartite alliance, saying that they were left out in the dark. He went on then to say that all of these plans are basically a ploy to privatize Eskom, to sell it for profit, basically mentioning how even these plans to acquire private electricity from your mines or buying from your neighboring countries, or even the skill sets that would be brought in, that's all a bigger ploy of privatizing Eskom for profit, basically, in some of what Zwelinzima Mavavi said a bit earlier on. Let's take a listen to that.
This is a long-term plan that have been started by the ANC government in 1997, which reminds us of the United States scholar Noam Chomsky, who normally say your plan to privatize normally involves defunding an institution, making people very angry. And when people's anger is at top levels, as it is in South Africa today as a result of stage 6 load shedding, then you offer privatization as the only solution. Yesterday's statement was pure fastened pace towards handing over energy to the private players to maximize profits and to make money for the shareholders. And all of the steps that have been announced, at the center of that is about that.
Nqobile, we'll get to you in a moment, but before we do, Aviwe, you also got some sentiments from business. What are they saying about that plan? I'm sure it's contrary to what the unions have just weighed in on.
Certainly, Andile Nomlala from the Black Management Forum suggests that it's long overdue, the intervention by the president and being hands-on. In fact, he says that they, as the BMF, spoke to the president some 3 months ago, suggesting that he needed to have a more active approach instead of getting insight from experts while not being in the fray of turning around the SOE. In fact, he went on to suggest that in those meetings, they wanted to be, as black business people, in the front of producing 3 coal power stations that would generate some 6,000 megawatts. But what he did not mince his words around, colleague, was them, in fact, threatening legal action when it came to never mind the privatization, but just conversations around transformation and this red tape that is said to be there, saying that if those red tapes do interfere with the transformation processes in Eskom, they'll go to court. Let's listen in on Andile Mlama and what he had to say.
Any plans of anyone who thinks that transformation, employment equity must be put at bay because we have an energy crisis. Our transformation policies are not policies of convenience. We do them when we feel like. These policies are meant to drive the structural recomposition of our economy. We will not excuse even Eskom at the doldrums of ourselves dying without electricity for them to go and find white matriculants that are made to be engineers. All the people that must be brought on board at Eskom must comply with the Employment Equity Act of our country and all the other interventions, and we welcome the interventions that are talking about fast-tracking the bureaucracy that is in place, making sure that there's flexibility and adoption of procurement quicker and everything. But if you compromise black economic empowerment in that process, then you're going to meet us in court. Black people today have nothing to eat anyways.
Ngobile, black people have nothing to eat. They are facing many challenges, the biggest one being these blackouts that we've been covering over the last few weeks, right? You've gotten an opportunity to speak to people on the ground. I mean, I'm sure the frustration was quite clear when you engaged them. What did they say?
Very clear. In fact, we spoke to Trevor Ngwane, and he didn't mince his words. He really said that this feels like a discrimination of some sort. He feels that a lot of people have been excluded. And he says that the poor at this point has not been considered. He says that everything that has been tabled has not had a chance to come to the ground and acknowledge what is happening to the people on the ground. Just like what they're saying to Aviwe Mtila, there's little to nothing for many people they cannot afford. And they're saying that even though there are these interventions, all it means is that if you can afford, yes, you can get those interventions. For someone who can't buy bread at the moment, how can they afford solar? So at this point, he was saying that it's not working out, but they are welcoming the interventions, of course, but they're saying that people have been excluded, and including the people that are poor that need it the most. But let's listen in to Trevor Ngwane.
Well, the fact that he's now talking of a crisis is good, because he's at last acknowledging that there is an electricity crisis in South Africa. But remember, our organization, the Soweto Electricity Crisis Committee, was formed in 2000. So he's waking up 22 years later. But certainly I'm concerned that the issues besetting poor working class communities, such as in Soweto, in Gugulethu, in Tanzane, Winterfeld, etc., their issues are not being addressed. There is poverty, there is unemployment. People simply cannot afford the high prices, they have to pay for electricity. So I don't think that the one time he spoke about poor communities was to talk about illegal connections, The other time he talked about households can put solar panels on top of their rooftops, But I think most people won't be able to afford buying solar panels.
And it's not just individual South Africans that are suffering here in Ngobile, it's the businesses as well who've been gravely impacted by the blackouts, many of them shutting down to never reopen again. You also got to speak to them. What are they saying?
Or if you are the two businesses I spoke to, one is situated in an area where they haven't had power for 4 months. The guy who works there, or the manager, has had to change the entire menu on the idea that he doesn't have power. So he's had to relook at the entire business structure just so that it can fit into the blackout and the outages. The second person I spoke to is a businesswoman who has been pushing. She's been pushing for Soweto Hotel to continue to function. But she says simple things like opening a door for your guest who's a tourist in the country cannot happen because she doesn't have power. But now the issues come with the fact that there are cable theft. There are also people that are using illegal connections. Now, because there's people who cannot afford, they continue to go and use things like illegal connection, and connectivity is becoming an issue now. So as a business, she cannot function. And the other gentleman also was saying now he has to rely on fuel. He has to rely on gas. That lady as well has to rely on fuel. It's a lot of money that they now have to take out, and they need to even look into retrenching people. Now, for government to come with these interventions, they feel that it's not working. They need the solution, and they need it right now. There needs to be an immediate plan, and they're asking for the government to come up with an immediate plan. Let's listen in to some of those local business owners.
It can work for those who have money. But for those people who don't have money, like your communities, it's not going to work. And also, I personally feel that it's a long-term plan. What are we doing now? The situation is now. What is government doing? What is the president saying about the now situation? Because we continue to lose business, as you have rightfully indicated. Tourist sector, tourism has opened up. We see tourists coming in by the busloads daily. But what are they coming to? South Africa, these people take a very negative report back to their various countries with that South Africa is a very, very, very poor country. And we are not a poor country. I don't believe we are. You know, it's very sad because, you know, the community itself around me, you know, these people have now resorted because of their basic needs, like electricity and water and sanitation is not there. They're now resorting to doing what doesn't favor some of our businesses, which is illegal connectivity. But they need the electricity. I'm sitting here, I don't have electricity for 4 months. The government entities are just not doing their part. Now, if President says to me that he's going to whatever country to go fetch whatever and do all of that stuff, for me, he said basically nothing. He's quiet.
So, Aviwe, you've just heard their businesses really reeling from the blackouts that we have been seeing across parts of the country. And you spoke to COSATU as well, and they are weighing in on this plan of the president. But just in your answer, just maybe weigh in on how important it will be to carry out the plan so that we can mitigate against the already dire economic situation that has come as a result.
The only way to eat a pudding is to actually taste it. Those were the exact words of the General Secretary of COSATU, that's Bheki Njali. I guess, colleague, that sums up the answer in terms of how important this plan is. As they say, it's a very important plan, and on paper, if it's done correctly, you will get the results that are needed, and sooner rather than later. But it's the trust that they actually don't have in government and actually executing it. So those are some of the sentiments around COSATU in terms of the situation that we find ourselves in, saying that while on paper it's all good, they have some questions and aspects of clarity that they need in. For example, we heard in the plan how more money is going to be pumped into Eskom. They want to know exactly how much will be pumped into Eskom, but they're saying that we'll only see the results of all of this when it happens, because there might, while the president might be good intended, there are issues of finance minister, treasury, or even SARS or the South African Reserve Bank that can be stumbling blocks. So they're saying that only time will tell if this plan will actually work.
And then, Ngobile, this plan has to work because the ripple effects of the load shedding have been that people use alternative means of lighting, candles. There's criminals that have become completely rampant in many communities. You've engaged these communities at various levels. I mean, what is it that is happening on the ground when it comes to those ripple effects?
Or if I want to take you back, remember the electricity march that we observed when we saw a lot of communities marching from Soweto to the mayoral's office just to deliver a memorandum about electricity. You'll remember part of that was that they worried about the fact that you cannot walk at night. They're saying that the crime has just grown and it continues to grow in their areas. They don't feel safe. And so those are part of the sentiments that you find on the ground. But at the second time, what you find is that you find the elderly who feels vulnerable. They're not completely in health like you and I, where you can wake up and be all right. They need things like insulin. Some others are even in oxygen tanks. So a lot of them just saying that this is difficult for them because they need power. They need power to keep some of that insulin in the right condition. I mean, a while back, we even heard from some of the people that were in the marches saying that there's an effect of using an insulin that has not been properly stored, right? So these are the conditions that these old people need to live under. One of them was talking about the fact that they've even gone to march. In what world should an old person go out and march? It does not make sense for a lot of communities. But now they've resorted to using things like candles. And now, I mean, when we were in Soweto, we went to a family that had a funeral, an 8-month baby, we understand, they're saying, that has died from smoke inhalation. Now, how does that work? What do you say to your children when a baby has passed on because there's not light? You know, just down the road from that family, you have a house that burns down. Same incident. There's no power. They're using other means. So it's affecting them on a personal level. It's affecting them in every other level at this point. You can't go out. You can't be inside. It's not safe in any way. So this plan needs to work, but it needs to work now. not in a long term.
Absolutely. Thank you very much to both of you for joining us. That is senior reporter Aviwe Mtila and Ngobile Madlala joining us to speak about the immediate reaction that has come about after the president announced the grand plan to fix South Africa's electricity crisis. Still